We are approaching the point where the only major decision in people's lives in America is paper or plastic at the checkout counter. They're not being given any right to decide their own fate, their own future through political means.
Right.
And that's really tragic.
And they're being
I think
sold.
people are entitled to a choice.
And they're being sold this line about shared sacrifice, that, everybody has a role to play in paying down the deficit, and, so nothing should be a sacred cow or exempt.
When Mitt Romney pays as much in taxes as you do, get back to me on shared sacrifice.
Right. And actually, let's talk about how we got into this in the first place. Not only, two unfunded wars abroad, an unfunded prescription drug benefit, the unfunded tax cuts, but then the Wall Street actors taking our economy over a cliff, the huge bailouts, the huge yawning deficit and debt created by the Great Recession. This was a crisis created for and by the wealthy, and yet they're seeking to actually have everyday, ordinary working and retired working Americans pay for this fiscal crisis that was not created for them or by them. So is this not indeed a transfer of wealth from low-income and middle-class populations to subsidize higher income folks?
It's a further transfer of wealth. We're already at the point where this nation is as unequal as it was just before the Great Depression hit in 1929. We have, in some respects, a worse distribution of income, a worse distribution of assets than we did in 1929, just before the Great Depression. And when you look at who's benefited from the recovery, the top 10% have benefited from all of the recovery. There hasn't been any recovery at all for the bottom 90%, according to the work of Professor Saez. And you ask yourself, where is all this heading?
Right.
Where does this end up? Do we end up with the 1% owning absolutely everything, and the 99% simply providing cheap labor to them?
That would be
That's
a serf
the direction
system.
where this is heading.
That's a feudal system.
Yes, that's right. It's a feudal system in this case, where people are not chained by the feudal system itself, but chained by the debt that they incur from having to survive.
That's right.
And that debt becomes the chains that bind them, and that debt is held by the 1%.
So let's.
So, I mean, the situation is not getting better; it's getting worse. And the underlying rationale for this is this bizarre misconception. There's some kind of moral equivalence between asking the filthy rich, the people who in many cases stole their money, to pay some modest amount of their money in taxes versus stealing from the poor,
right.
stealing from old people, stealing from sick people. That somehow those two things are the same. When we introduced our letter asking members of Congress to promise that they would vote against cuts in Social Security and Medicare benefits, a reporter came to me and said to me, well, this sounds like the other side. This sounds like the promise that the Republicans make that they won't raise taxes on the rich. And I said, yeah, just like a fish is like a bicycle. How could you possibly think that asking millionaires and billionaires and multinational corporations to pay something resembling the same amount of their income that ordinary people pay, how can you say that that's the same as stealing Social Security benefits, stealing Medicare benefits, stealing Medicaid benefits that people pay for in their salaries every single time that they get a paycheck?
You heard it here first, Congressman. You are speaking truth to power. The proposal that's being put forth can be seen as a transfer of wealth from low-income, middle-class populations to higher-income individuals. It can be seen as theft because these are earned benefits. And where is this heading? The end game is the question. Do you think that this will be put up against the debt ceiling showdown again? Will you be forced to actually choose between whether we actually renege on the full faith and credit of the U.S. government or whether we make cuts to Social Security and Medicare benefits?
Well, the Republicans look at the polls and they see that right now they have a nationwide deficit of 8%. If the election were held today, the Democrats would get 8% more than the Republicans. And despite all their gerrymandering and the power of their dirty money, their special interest money that just pours into one race after another, they know that they will lose the House if that trend continues. They know that. They can only cheat so much. And their basic philosophy is we can't beat them, cheat them, but that only takes you so far. So I think that the Republicans, understanding that, are becoming a little bit more reluctant to toss this country into one artificial crisis after another, whether it's the sequester, whether it's the tax breaks, whether it's the debt limit, whether it's the markdown in the value of our credit, whatever it might be. They have become crisis junkies, but the fact is they realize it's not good for them anymore, just like it's not good for the rest of us. So I think that they have walked back from that ledge.
All right. Congressman Alan Grayson, can you stay with us a little bit longer after the break?
Sure.
All right. We'll be joined by Nancy Altman, co-director of Social Security Works, right after the break. You are listening to Pivot Point with Myra Rockeymoore, sponsored by the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Stay with us.